One reason Job was Job is that Job was generous. Grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Sabbath School Study Group. I'm Chris Bailey. This is part 4 of our 5-part series talking about living unto the least of these. Today we're going to look at the example of Brother Job. Now, I know when you're thinking about finances, generosity, giving to those who are in need, we may not think of Job. Maybe if we're talking about trials and struggles and enduring suffering, but that was the latter Job. But the Job that actually is the reason why the Lord said, look at this guy, is because he was so crazy generous. Look there in Job chapter 1, verse 8. In the conversation between the Lord and Satan, the Lord says to Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? That there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. All right, so now we see here that Job is called out and called up as an example of the fact that this is proof that the world is not all gone. I've got mine. I have my chosen, those who've chosen me in the earth. Now, as he goes on to describe Job, way down now in Job chapter 29, here we see a confession on Job's part as to how and what he did. In Job chapter 29, verse 12 and 13, this is Job now speaking of himself, I, Job, delivered the poor that cried, and the fatherless, and him that had none to help him. The blessing of him that was ready to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. Now remember, in the story, Job gets tested, and he goes through one phase of testing, and he loses everything. But then in the second phase of testing, the devil attacks him, and he starts to lose his actual self, his health and life. So now in his lamenting, Job says a lot of things. But here we see a confession where he says, I helped the poor. I looked out for those who were in need, specifically the fatherless and the widows. I was the blessing. I was the answer to their prayer. So Job's life of reflecting the righteousness of Christ was that luster and that shine came from a life of generosity. He didn't stop there, because when you look in verse 15 through 16, he's again talking of himself. I, Job, was eyes to the blind, and I was feet to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and the cause which I knew not, I searched out. Job was serious about thinking about those who were in need. It bothered him that, not that he had, but it bothered him more so that there were those who had not. He didn't walk around with a guilt complex when it came to his wealth. There's no scriptural evidence to that. And in the commendation that God gives of him as a servant, he says he eschews evil. Job was someone who thought about other people and they mattered to him. He cared for them. And this is one of the things that allowed the Lord to call him out and to commend him as a servant. So when we think about Job and his wealth, the real wealth was not in the volume of the possessions that he had, but it was the fact that he was so open and sensitive to those who were around him. I'm praying for this myself personally. For some of you, this is a natural type of love. You're a very thoughtful person. Your gift of love and your love language is actually through giving of gifts or through the giving of service. But for others, it may not be as native. It may not be something that you do as often as others. And that's okay, because Job is showing us that we can grow in that. We can give like that. And we don't have to have a lot, but we do have to have a heart that's sensitive to others who are around us. I'm praying for this, and I hope that we will consider the man Job as an example for us today.